each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income. And that phrase, in keeping with his income, is crucial. Saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. The principle there is proportional giving, that you're giving in proportion to your income. It doesn't call on everybody to give the same amount. It's calling for proportional giving. I can't tell you what is right for you to give in your particular circumstances. I'd say the Old Testament called the people under the Old Covenant to start at 10%, or to give 10%. I think that's a good place for most of us to start. But at the end of the day, I'm not so much concerned with how much you give as I am that you're giving, and that you're concerned to give, because that says something about where your heart is. 2 Corinthians 9:7 talks about giving cheerfully. 2 Corinthians 9:13 tells us we ought to give voluntarily. We ought to be motivated by the gospel as we do this. We never want to engage in guilt giving. You don't hear me trying to twist your arms about giving. We ought to be motivated by the gospel. What God did in giving us Christ ought to motivate us to want to give of a portion of what he's given to us so freely, physically, to support the work of the ministry. I think of 1 Timothy 6:17, where Paul exhorts Timothy. He says, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God." And he goes on to say how that provides a good foundation for the future. And the point is that Paul is telling Timothy to encourage these people to live in light of eternity. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, "Mike, I'm not rich," okay? Well, technically, most of you are rich, okay? We have to remember, in the first century, most everybody lived hand to mouth. Only the rich had enough excess money to not live hand to mouth every day. So most people in America, and most of us, I would say, have enough discretionary funds that we would be well considered rich in the first century terms. And so Paul is saying, don't set our hopes and our trust in the uncertainty of riches, but on God. And that provides a good foundation for the future. And the point is that we're supposed to be living in light of eternity. We're supposed to be giving people. And quite honestly, I want you to know that as your pastor, I want to be a good example in that. I want you to know that I give too. This isn't one of those things where the pastor, gets all over your case about not giving and he's just sitting back there watching the bucks roll in. That's not how this works. I'm a member of the congregation. Giving is a part of my worship as well. So Melissa and I give on our income as well. I want you to know that I don't know how much each of you give. I've chosen not to know that. Only the financial team knows that. That allows me to minister to you without feeling any kind of constraint and maybe fear of man creeping in. So that way I can tell you what you need to hear without fear of, are they going to take their checkbook and go elsewhere? That helps me be the kind of pastor that I need to be. My concern, as I said, is more whether you're giving rather than how much, because whether you're giving says a lot about where your heart is. Number 3, in terms of expectations, we ought to be building relationships. And I touched on this a little bit in point 1, but my point here is to go a little more in depth. It's not God's will for us to just come in and sit down and then go home. I don't think that's what God had in mind when he talks about us being a church family. Families are involved in each other's lives. Encourage one another, come alongside one another, are really interested in one another. And that's what God wants for us. We can't fulfill our duties to one another, all those one anothering passages, if we're just coming in, sitting down, and then going home and giving no other thought to each other throughout the rest of the week, or having no other kind of interaction. And the responsibility is partially on you. I know sometimes people get miffed and they say, nobody's reached out to me. To which I always ask, well, have you reached out to anybody yourself? And typically the answer is no. And I think that sometimes betrays a very me-centered kind of view of the church family, where it's all about me and nobody's reached out to me. And to be sure, the church family, we need to be reaching out to one another. But at the end of the day, we're all responsible to be reaching out as well. And we encourage openness and honesty here at Gospel Life. In other words, the goal is not to be people who simply put on our church face, play the spiritual game, and but rather people who invite accountability. And I think there are appropriate ways for us to do that, but we want to have a posture of openness with one another. Number 4 is that their in terms of expectation of membership, is submissive to leadership in the church, okay? And let me just say, this is one of those really tough ones, especially if you come from a background where you felt like the leadership abused its authority. So I get that. But nonetheless, it's what the scriptures say. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17 says, "Obey those who have the rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give an account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable to you." Now, let me just kind of clarify what this means. Submission to church's leadership does not mean that you're a yes man or a yes woman. It doesn't mean that you always agree with the leadership's ideas, okay? You can ask the deacons about this. I invite their feedback. I invite them to speak honestly and disagree with me. You ask them. I have no problem with that. I don't have all the answers, and I think it's wisdom comes in a multitude of counselors. So I have no problem with folks disagreeing with me or anything like that. What submission to the leadership comes down to, though, is that what it means is that when it comes down to a time where a decision has to be made, that you trust the leadership to do that in the best interest of the church, even if you agree or you don't agree. Because there'll be times that decisions are made and you say, I wouldn't have done that, that's not my favorite. But submission to leadership says, yeah, I talked to Pastor Mike, and yeah, he didn't agree with me, and the church is going this way, or they're making this decision. I don't agree, but it's not the end of the world. That's what this means. So always feel free. Don't think this means you can't come approach me. I want to be approachable, okay? And I need to be. I need to be humble enough to be approachable. Number 5, we want to be active in service as God gives opportunity. That's an expectation of membership. Active in service. 1 Corinthians 12:7 says, "But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal," or profit for the common good. If you're a Christian, God has given you a gift for the benefit of this body. All of us have at least one gift to serve the body with. And so I want you to see, I've said this before, ministry isn't just what the pastor does, it's what the congregation does. Ephesians 4:12 reminds us that part of my job as the pastor is to equip you all to do the work of the ministry. So you say, well, I don't know what my gift is. Well, begin with asking some questions. What do I like to do? How do I like to serve? What are you good at? Do other people recognize a particular aptitude in your life in an area of service? At the end of the day, just jump in and serve. Jump in and serve. And very often, you find your gift as the church, as you jump in and serve, people begin to recognize what you're good at, and you find your niche as you serve. Sometimes the temptation on our part is just to sit there and say, I don't know what my gift is, so I'm just going to sit here until God reveals it. That's not how it works. God says, get out there and serve and do whatever needs to be done. And guess what? In doing that, very often, is where you'll find exactly how God's gifted you and what God's burdened you for. Number 6, active in personal worship. Not just corporately meeting with the body, but personal times of repentance, prayer, Bible reading, evangelism, concern for people's soul. In other words, being a member of the church means being concerned to walk with Jesus from, not just Sunday, but Monday through Saturday as well. All of our lives. Number 7, we need to be active in the business of the church. Active in the church's business. We are a congregational polity. We are an elder-led congregationalism. What that means is that the pastors provide the leadership, the direction, the vision. The deacons assist with that, and the church votes on it. The church has a say in what happens in this local assembly. And so it is a dangerous thing when a church becomes apathetic and is unwilling to have a voice in the direction of the church. That's asking for an abuse of power. So let me encourage you to be involved in the voting process. When we have things to vote on and we have members meetings, they're not very often, but when we do, be there for that. And you vote in a lot of ways. You vote not just formally in the case of a membership meeting. You vote in a variety of ways. You vote in your attendance. You vote in your giving. Quite honestly, don't vote for a budget if you have no intent to support it. When we vote every year for a budget, we're voting to support that budget, and we're saying as individuals, we're going to do our best to make sure that budget gets met for this year, that the priorities of the church are accomplished financially. Or if they're not accomplished, it's not because there's a lack of money. There's some other reason why we weren't able to do what we wanted. And so giving, we vote in terms of our direction. So the church has a say in the business of the church. So I don't want you to ever think that you are fired as church members or you have no role to play. You do have a role to play, which is why I'm encouraging you to be involved in business meetings and voting on things. I know they're not always fun. I know they're kind of boring sometimes, but nonetheless they're important. They're important. The last thing is that we're active in seeking to live in unity with one another. Active is the key word. Seeking to actively, and I didn't put that on the slides, but seeking to live in unity and active seeking. What does that look like in real life where you're actively seeking to live in unity with each other? Let me just give you some examples. I think I mentioned business meetings a moment ago. Business meetings are a great example of where unity can start. Striving for unity in the church through harmony in business meetings. So that means not necessarily that you agree with everything that's said in a business meeting, but how you disagree is one of the great ways we can display our unity. And what have you, making sure we have a right spirit. I've had professing Christians just here a professing Christian a couple years ago from another denomination point out to me how, and he's stereotyping here, but about how Baptists love to talk about unity until their business meetings. And then the gloves come off, and they're duking it out in their business meetings. And I've heard some serious doozies, of stories that have taken place in Baptist business meetings. And you know what? That is a terrible testimony. And so we can work to remedy that, at least as far as our local church is concerned, by making sure that we promote unity in our business meeting. And some of the ways you can do that is by, if you have a question, seek the answer in advance. Guard your heart. We don't, in business meetings, we don't look for discussion just for discussion's sake. If you get a genuine question, that's fine. But for the most part, we want to try to answer all of the things up front. And then during the business meeting, if there's anything final that needs to be taken care of, we take care of it, answer any final questions, and then we vote. Business meetings don't need to be a place where, you're hearing about something for the first time, which is why I try to tell you what's going on, several weeks ahead of time. On a personal level, what does this